Hey everybody, Mark over here at Twanger's Turntable. Hope this finds you all well. First and foremost, thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate the support, and I hope you'll stick around and enjoy this video with me. Jumping on here for the continuation of the thread started by Jacob. I'll leave a link to his channel there. For the alphabet, my latest video was the letter C, A, B, C. So we're on D today. I watched Jacob's video. He did some Dylan, some Deep Purple, Destruction Hammer, I think. There's some bands actually I hadn't even heard of. So that's one of the great things about these threads. You get introduced to some bands maybe you haven't heard of or forgotten about, whatnot. So maybe that'll be the case here. Stick around and I'll go through some of the Ds that I have. The first one I'm going to show is one that I was just, I purchased this coming up on 2 years ago. It's the reissue of their 1978 debut. And it's Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, they're known as. I shouldn't say we. Oftentimes on a Friday night, I'll spend some time over at Patrick's live stream where, you know, a lot of the panel with John from Bip Bop Boom and Vance and Steve and Mark and Randy, a whole bunch of people. Check out their channels. Maybe I'll leave some links there as well. You know, they stream some tunes, they talk about music, and very knowledgeable people. I pick up a lot from, and it just so happens they were playing this album, and it was kind of cool because I just picked it up about, like I say, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and I really like it. It's kind of that early, almost punk crossover, garage, alternative kind of. But DMZ, good debut. If you've not heard it, I would suggest checking it out. Like I say, it came out in '78. This is the reissue. It's on that silver, they call it a silver vinyl. It's more of a gray, to be honest with you. But good album. If you like that kind of music, like I say, it's kind of, I wouldn't say punk. It's a garage band, garage sound. It's very lo-fi sounding punk. Some of the guys on that stream were comparing it to stuff such as like Iggy Pop and the Stooges and stuff like that. I don't know. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I don't know. Form your own opinion. Check them out. Pretty good stuff though. I like it. Next up is essentially just a Dave Grohl project from. He did that movie there. What the hell was it called? Studio 666. So this is essentially the soundtrack to that. It's by and large entirely Dave Grohl. I think he was joined by Jim Rhoda on guitar on some of the tracks. And somebody else did some keyboard work on here. It escapes me right now, but essentially it's all Dave Grohl. And it's a much heavier, thrashier metal side of Dave Grohl that you wouldn't hear in Nirvana or Foo Fighters or any of his other stuff. Even the them Crooked Vultures, that's more of a classic rock type of sound. This is certainly much more metal, but yeah, I would suggest checking it out. I think that was a release of 2022, if I recall. And there's a funny story about how I came about getting that record, but I'll have more on that later. Right now we're just doing the Ds. Next up, some Canadian content, and Jerry Doucette, who passed away also in 2022. This is his debut from 1977, Mama Let Him Play. Probably not all that well known outside of the Canadian borders, I would suggest, but it's a really good record. He did a few more after this, and like I say, well, many more after this, in fact. But this was his debut. And where I grew up, this was probably most popular in around the 79, 80, 81 even. Even though it had been released in 77, I think it really never broke until later on, at least where I was. It was all over the place at that time in the early 80s. Check it out if you haven't checked it. I think it's worth a listen. Next up, I mentioned that Dream Widow, that I came about that. I came about that due to trying to get a copy from this artist, and this is his 7th solo debut, Danzig, 777. I Luciferi, So I was trying to get his, I'm not going to expand on this too much, but I was trying to get his 6th album, Satan's Child, I believe it's called, 666, his 6th release. And I'm going to post a video about that because it's quite an experience I had trying to get that album. But this is his 7th one from Danzig. Those who are not initiated, that's basically his prior work was with Misfits and Sanheim. So good stuff. Really like that particular album. I don't have any of his other stuff on vinyl, and I would like to get more of it because I do really dig it. And then we go back to 1983 with the 3rd album from these guys, Def Leppard, Pyromania. This is not particularly my favorite. I would say that's probably High and Dry, even On Through the Night, I think are better records from start to front on this. And by the time this was released, Pete Willis had already been canned from the band, but he does appear on here on, I think, all of the tracks on rhythm guitar, and was replaced. This is the first album with Phil Collins on, not to be mistaken with the Genesis Phil Collins, but Phil Collin on guitar on this one, who had previously been with the band Girl. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that band, but that's the first one, Pyromania. I love that album. That got a lot of play when I was growing up, and I still really like that one as opposed to anything they did after. I'm not a fan of Hysteria. I'm not a fan of anything they did going forward after the Pyromania was about where I just lost interest in whatever Def Leppard was doing. And I don't want to put a negative spin on it. That's not my bag. That's just my preference, is their first 3 albums. Next up, we're going to go with Ronnie James Dio. Dio, Last in Line, his follow-up album, of course, to Holy Diver that came out in '83. His solo stuff after doing his stint with Rainbow and Elf and Black Sabbath, of course. But yeah, this is I think Dio's best lineup were those first 3 albums, which had Vivian Campbell and Vinny Appice, and just amazing album. This is probably my favorite out of those 3, The Last in Line. Holy Diver would be a close runner-up. Anybody who's paid attention to my channel, I'm terrible at trying to rank albums because I do find something I like about all of them, and oftentimes it'll just depend which one I'm listening to is my favorite. But with Dio and his solo work, I would suggest this is probably near the top of my list most times. Of course, it also had Jimmy Bain and what's the keyboardist's name? Claude something or another. But yeah, fantastic album. And just to round it out, just because it's in the letter D's and it's an older release and probably a very well-known global artist, Donovan, and all I have is the greatest hits. But yeah, the Hurdy-Gurdy, man, I love that tune. I always have ever since I was a kid. But there's so many good tunes on here, this compilation. And it's because I also just got this recently. I think I showed it in one of my other videos there of stuff that I found. I don't know if this was in the dollar bin video I did, or maybe I didn't do that video yet. The video, I did a video where I received a bunch of records from a customer I had. And I think that's where this one actually came from, if I recall. But anyway, that's it. That's the letter D. As I alluded to, if you haven't been over to Jacob's channel, I'll leave a link below. Please make sure to go over and check him out, give him a visit, and sub him up or whatever. Really enjoy doing these threads. It's an easy way for me to get on here and share some of my vinyl. Not for lack of ideas. I have tons of ideas, but finding the time to bring those ideas to life. And some of the videos that I am working on in the background you haven't seen yet, they do consume a lot of time because it's a hobby. I enjoy doing it. And so when I'm editing these videos and whatnot, it's not necessarily that I don't like editing. If anything, it's probably that I'm not as familiar with the tools to do the editing. And once I find out how to do it, I do enjoy it. But yeah, there'll be more to come on that later. That's it. I'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed this. Check out some of the other videos in this thread doing the letters of the alphabet. It's a lot of fun. And hope to see you again soon here at Twanger's Turntable. Until then, take care, everybody. Ciao.